Individuals involved in criminal activities will often resort to extreme measures to mitigate their sentences or, ideally, evade accountability entirely. Occasionally, their tactics are so disturbing and repugnant that they shock even seasoned law enforcement professionals. This is the story of how authorities apprehended a true chameleon, a master of deception and improvisation. Veronica Pannarella, a young woman residing in Italy, endured numerous hardships throughout her life. At the tender age of 16, while socializing at a bar, she crossed paths with David Stivel, a man who immediately captivated her. Despite a 4-year age gap, they connected instantly, and on their first encounter, Veronica candidly shared her life story with David. They embarked on a romantic relationship, notwithstanding Veronica's status as a student. A mere 3 months into their courtship, Veronica expressed her desire to start a family with David. Convinced she wanted a child with him, David reciprocated her feelings. They moved in together, and shortly thereafter, Veronica discovered she was pregnant. In 2006, their son, Loris, was born. At this juncture, Veronica was just 17, while David was 21. This period coincided with a tumultuous time within Veronica's family. She frequently clashed with her parents, prompting her to leave home. The birth of a child out of wedlock further strained her relationship with her relatives. Nevertheless, Veronica managed to establish a semblance of family life despite her youth. Contrary to her family's predictions, things initially appeared stable. Tragically, fate had a cruel twist in store, but until that moment, Veronica strived to provide her son with everything he needed. Eventually, the couple formalized their union through marriage. Veronica became pregnant again, giving birth to a second son named Diego. She remained partially dependent on her parents for support, as David's income as a driver was insufficient to sustain a family of 4. Both families provided financial assistance to the young couple. Veronica chose to dedicate herself entirely to raising her children and managing the household. David regarded her as a devoted wife, praising her frugality, tidiness, and maternal instincts. As the children grew, they developed a close bond with their mother. Veronica dedicated her free time to them, although their relationship occasionally resembled that of young friends rather than parent and child. This dynamic likely stemmed from Veronica's young age when she became a mother. Some observed that she retained a rebellious spirit, leading to increased friction with her parents. They questioned her ability to be a responsible mother, perceiving her approach as frivolous. However, any attempts to reason with Veronica resulted in emotional outbursts. The family resided in the close-knit rural community of Santa Croce Camarina, Sicily, a small town with a population of approximately 10,000. While the setting was idyllic, Veronica's early motherhood was considered unconventional. No one could have foreseen the horrific tragedy that would unfold. Around 1 p.m. on November 29, 2014, Veronica Pannarella arrived at the local police station to report the disappearance of her 8-year-old son, Loris. She explained that she had accompanied him to school that morning, as was her routine. She claimed to have seen him enter the building with other students before dropping her younger son off at kindergarten. Loris was expected to remain at school until 12:30 p.m. When Veronica returned to collect him, he was nowhere to be found. Alarmed, she immediately filed a missing person report. The police promptly visited the school, but neither the staff nor the students had seen Loris that day. Classmates assumed he had skipped school, while others speculated about a possible abduction. However, Loris was known for his intelligence, making it unlikely he would willingly enter a stranger's vehicle. The question remained, how could he have vanished if his mother had escorted him to school? At the time, David Stivel, then 29, was working as a driver in Rome. Veronica had not informed him of the situation. The Carabinieri contacted David, who expressed surprise at the news. He immediately called Veronica, who confirmed Loris' disappearance. David promptly boarded a flight back home. Upon his arrival, he was met with a social media post displaying a photograph of his wife and son, announcing the discovery of Loris' lifeless body. Just 4 hours after the initial report, Loris' remains were found in a canal near an abandoned mill, mere minutes from the family home. An elderly hunter stumbled upon the grim scene during his routine walk in the woods. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was the body of a child and immediately alerted the authorities. The forensic team discovered the boy's mutilated body, contorted unnaturally in the ditch, his pants partially lowered, and his underwear missing. The police immediately suspected a sexually motivated crime, believing they were pursuing a child predator who not only assaulted but also murdered his victims, making him exceptionally dangerous. News of the tragedy gripped the small village, spreading fear among residents. The case garnered national attention, dominating Italian news headlines and becoming one of the most prominent stories of 2014. Public outcry demanded swift justice, and detectives worked tirelessly to apprehend the perpetrator. Investigators noted peculiarities in the crime scene, deviating from the typical patterns exhibited by sexual predators and other violent offenders. The strangest detail wasn't the missing underwear. It was the fact that after removing it, the perpetrator redressed the boy's pants. While some offenders keep trophies, they rarely replace clothing afterward. Furthermore, similar crimes were unheard of in Santa Croce Camarina. Naturally, investigators turned their attention to the victim's family. Veronica and Davide Stivel were respected, known as a loving couple. Though Veronica had Loris young, she was now a mature woman and appeared to be a devoted mother. In such cases, families often provide crucial insights, so detectives interviewed the parents. They learned Davide, a truck driver, spent considerable time away, sometimes present only 50 days a month. Loris primarily stayed with Veronica, who struggled with childcare and household chores, often voicing her difficulties. Being alone so much fueled rumors of infidelity, though these proved unsubstantiated. When police visited the Stivel home, Davide described Veronica as devastated, weeping incessantly and refusing food, leading to severe emaciation requiring hospitalization and intravenous feeding. Officers witnessed Veronica's distress firsthand. She was emotionally and physically broken, with dark circles and pale skin. Loris's younger brother, Diego, initially remained at home but was later sent to his grandparents due to Veronica's fragile state. Her neglect extended beyond herself to Diego's needs. Davide quit his job to support her. Despite the family's grief, police took both parents to the discovery site, recording their reactions. The video captured a shell of a woman, barely recognizable as Veronica, overwhelmed by the loss. Suspicion briefly fell upon Horatio Fedona, the hunter who found Loris. His discovery, just 4 hours after the boy was reported missing, seemed improbable. While this warranted investigation, Fedona passed a polygraph, had a solid alibi, and his DNA and fingerprints weren't on Loris. The scrutiny on Fedona sparked local gossip about Veronica's supposed relationships with him and his grandson. Ultimately, Fedona was exonerated, confirmed to have stumbled upon the body accidentally. With no other leads, investigators called in reinforcements from Rome. Reviewing the case, the Roman Carabinieri suspected Veronica's involvement, noting her strained family relationships. Loris's grandparents recounted the boy mentioning a school experiment involving plastic cable ties purchased by his mother. This, recounted a day before his disappearance, seemed odd. Cable ties are dangerous and unsuitable for school. Teachers confirmed no such experiment existed. The details seemed irrelevant until the autopsy report. The report placed Loris's death between 9 and 10 a.m. on the day he vanished, caused by strangulation with a thin object. The cable ties became significant. The medical examiner concluded the murder occurred near the body's location, as injuries from the fall were sustained peri-mortem. Perhaps Loris did want the ties, fabricating the school story, carrying them in his backpack. But how would the killer know? It seemed unlikely they'd search the bag for a weapon. Finding the blue backpack became crucial. Landfills receiving waste from Santa Croce Camarina were searched for days, but the backpack remained elusive. The forensic evidence presented another anomaly. Despite the missing underwear and lowered pants, There were no signs of sexual assault or foreign DNA. This challenged the initial theory. While still seeking a perpetrator, police realized this wasn't a typical sex crime. The motive was unclear. A psychological profile was needed, but the information was too fragmented. The next step was to reconstruct Veronica and Loris's movements on the day of the murder, hoping CCTV footage from the town's main street would provide answers. I spent a considerable amount of time analyzing the surveillance footage. Law enforcement, of course, was looking for a third party, perhaps a detective, trailing the woman and her son in their black Volkswagen Polo, possibly followed by another suspicious vehicle. However, despite their best efforts, the investigators couldn't identify anything out of the ordinary. Yet, certain inconsistencies quickly surfaced. For one, they never observed the boy entering the school, despite his mother's insistence that she had practically walked him to the doorstep. It became evident that Veronica wasn't being truthful, and they hadn't reached the school that morning. Dozens of hours of video were scrutinized, revealing only the younger child exiting the car near the daycare. Investigators persisted in examining camera footage from the surrounding vicinity for any clues. They discovered that at an intersection Veronica typically passed through, she instead diverted toward the church near, where the victim was later discovered. This deviation seemed peculiar, given her established route over the years. What could possibly compel a young mother to alter her routine on the very day her son was found deceased? This naturally raised red flags for the Carabinieri. At this juncture, the officers chose to withhold their findings to avoid alarming Veronica. However, they now viewed the young woman as a person of interest. Seasoned officers decided to immediately verify her account. They requested Veronica accompany them to retrace her route on the day of the tragedy, providing a first-hand demonstration. They were already familiar with the route, having reconstructed it using CCTV footage. She consented, and the reenactment commenced. As the police car approached the critical intersection where Veronica had deviated from her usual path, she fabricated a story, claiming to have followed her typical route. There was no longer any doubt. She was deliberately concealing something. Her lies solidified her status as the prime suspect, prompting detectives to search the Stival residence and bring Veronica in for questioning. Realizing she was considered a potential murderer, Veronica became indignant, vehemently denying any harm to her son. The investigators, however, remained unconvinced. The interrogation stretched for hours, with Veronica steadfastly maintaining her innocence. During the questioning, she conceded to dropping her older son off 500 meters from school, citing a time constraint and the boy's ability to walk the remaining distance independently. She speculated that someone might have attacked him en route. When questioned about her presence near the ravines on the morning of the murder, she denied being there, claiming complete unfamiliarity with the area. This, of course, was false. Veronica's sister confirmed their childhood familiarity with the location, knowing every inch, and security footage corroborated her presence there. Detectives had to pore over countless hours of video to validate their suspicions and uncover further leads. The murdered boy's father was brought into the investigation. Initially, Davide struggled to believe his wife's involvement in their son's death. He did identify his wife and 2 children in the morning footage as they left the house. However, instead of driving her older son to school, she returned home with him. A figure resembling Loris briefly appeared on camera and wasn't seen again. Subsequently, Veronica dropped off the younger child at daycare and returned home. Uncharacteristically, instead of parking in front of the house, she reversed into the garage. This occurred around 9 a.m. Detectives believe the boy was killed during this time frame. He was absent from school and at home, and while Veronica was in the garage, her actions were obscured from the cameras. The whole scenario appeared highly suspect. It was clear she was hiding something. When confronted, she continued to deny any wrongdoing, insisting she took her older son to school, then the younger to daycare, before returning home to her usual routine. She maintained he might have been abducted just before school. The police, however, were skeptical. They observed her leaving the house again at 9:23 a.m., and just 2 minutes later, she was driving towards the old mill where Loris's body was discovered. She arrived back home at 9:38 a.m., demonstrably alone. Given the swiftness of the events, the child was likely already deceased when she disposed of his body. At 9:41 a.m., Veronica departed for her regular cooking class, which began at 10 a.m., leaving early to avoid being late and raising suspicion. Nobody there noticed anything unusual about her demeanor. She appeared as she always did. Her phone and car GPS data corroborated the itinerary the detectives had pieced together. Unfortunately, at this stage, the evidence wasn't sufficient to press charges. Investigators continued gathering information while Veronica remained in custody. They still lacked concrete proof, witness testimonies, or recordings of the mother committing the murder. Just as it seemed the perpetrator was about to be exposed, a policewoman stationed outside the school approached the station. She attested to seeing Veronica drop her child off at school on the alleged day of the murder. However, investigators didn't take her statement at face value. Her account contradicted the video evidence. Since the prime suspect followed the same routine daily, the officer might have simply confused the dates. Meanwhile, behind bars, the young mother vehemently proclaimed her innocence, but seeds of doubt had been sown. When the carabinieri informed her husband about Veronica's lies regarding the route taken with Loris, he, too, began to question her behavior. The police recognized an opportunity. Knowing the suspect likely trusted her husband, they decided to arrange a meeting, hoping he could elicit a confession or new information. After all, Veronica was the only person with a complete account of that fateful morning. Davide conceded that it was a sound strategy, but he wasn't seeking her conviction. Driven by a desperate need to uncover the truth, I agreed to a face-to-face meeting with my wife, Veronica, behind bars, without any electronic surveillance. On January 6, 2015, a month after the tragic death of our son, Loris, I visited her in prison. While my presence there was technically against regulations, the police made an exception, hoping it might help resolve the case. Upon my arrival, Veronica's first concern wasn't a greeting, but a suspicion I was wearing a wire. I reassured her, demonstrating I had no recording devices. This was unnecessary, as the prison's cameras documented everything. She continued to maintain her innocence, sticking to her initial story. Her narrative remained consistent. She had driven Loris to school and had no knowledge of his subsequent fate. She repeated this to the police, her lawyer, me, and our family. Detectives struggled to find evidence linking her to the tragedy. Even a motive remained elusive. Everyone described her as a loving mother devoted to her sons. While rumors circulated, investigations yielded nothing concrete. Veronica genuinely appeared to be a caring parent. The only potential explanation the detectives considered was a severe emotional breakdown or depression, which her imprisonment undoubtedly exacerbated. With the investigation at a standstill, a new approach was devised. They arranged for Veronica to visit Loris's grave, hoping for a breakthrough. Surrounded by a police escort, she was transported to the cemetery. The scene, with its flashing lights and multiple vehicles, suggested the transfer of a dangerous criminal. The gravesite was of course bugged. Authorities anticipated an apology or confession, a private moment of truth between mother and son. Veronica did speak, but her words were unexpected. She wept, prayed, and vowed to find and punish the person responsible for her son's death. This stunned the carabinieri. She was returned to her cell, the visit yielding nothing conclusive. During the return trip, Veronica claimed a sudden surge of memories related to the day of Loris's disappearance. She requested another meeting with me. On November 6, 2015, I returned to the prison, the meeting again recorded. This time, Veronica admitted she now recalled not taking Loris to school that day. She struggled to articulate her fragmented memories, describing a state of unreality, a mental fog. She recounted taking her younger son to kindergarten, returning home where Loris was supposed to be, having stayed home as he didn't want to go to school. Upon returning, she didn't find him. In her disoriented state, she assumed she had already taken him to school, realizing her mistake only when she went to pick him up. The police remained skeptical, yet sensed progress. This near confession was the closest they had come to a breakthrough. They viewed her memory loss claim as a ploy to mitigate her guilt and potential sentence. Others, however, recognized the possibility of genuine mental distress. Our youngest son was too young to provide any helpful information. Despite their suspicions, the Carabinieri orchestrated a visit to our home, hoping to trigger further memories. Veronica was guided through the house, unchanged since the day of Loris's death. In his room, the dramatic shift occurred. She began speaking in Loris's voice, reenacting a conversation from that morning. Her detached demeanor convinced the detectives they were dealing with a manipulative liar, attempting to deflect the investigation. Could she, in a seemingly sound mental state, have deceived everyone for over a year? Numerous specialists had examined her, unable to detect any fabrication. Her lawyer maintained her mental state was a key factor. Eventually, Veronica offered another version of events, one that many still believe, though the police remain unconvinced. In this account, she returned home from the kindergarten and began washing bottles. Loris was in his room while she attended to chores. Hearing nothing unusual, she later entered his room to find him lifeless, cable ties around his neck. He appeared to have been playing with the ties, accidentally tightening them. She described his startled eyes, his futile attempts to loosen the ties, only tightening them further. Knowing how the ties worked, unable to break them, she ran to the kitchen for scissors. Upon returning, Loris was unresponsive. Panic ensued. She tried to call emergency services, but her trembling hands prevented her from dialing. Fearing blame, in her distressed state, she decided to dispose of his body. Later, forensic analysis confirmed scratches on Loris's face and neck, consistent with attempts to remove the ties. Investigators theorized that in her panic, Veronica might have inadvertently tightened a tie, further restricting his airway. At this point, the police sought to clarify details and stimulate further recollection. The case of Loris Stivel remains shrouded in mystery. Returned to the ravine where Loris's body was discovered, Veronica, his mother, confessed to disposing of his remains but maintained she hadn't killed him. Her claim was immediately suspect. She couldn't explain the missing underwear, a detail that contradicted her narrative. The idea of an 8-year-old Loris placing the zip ties around his own neck, tightening them without crying for help, seemed highly improbable. Veronica's explanation that the ravine's depth caused Loris's pants to slip and twist as he tumbled down seemed equally far-fetched. Prosecutors challenged her confession, finding her erratic behavior more concerning than her words. Veronica's unusual parking method in the garage, convenient for discreetly loading a body, raised further suspicion. This occurred before she could have known about Loris's death, according to her own timeline, suggesting premeditation to the prosecution. The defense argued that Loris died accidentally, perhaps through misadventure with the zip ties, and a panicked Veronica, shocked by the tragedy, hid the body. However, they couldn't explain why she removed Loris's underwear and then redressed him. Veronica claimed no memory of this act, but the prosecution viewed it as staging a sexual assault to mislead investigators, a tactic that initially worked. A dramatic turn came when Veronica accused Andrea Stivel, Loris's paternal grandfather, of the murder. She alleged an affair and claimed Loris witnessed them together, threatening to tell his father. Andrea, she said, silenced him in a fit of rage. Despite the outlandish claim, law enforcement investigated. CCTV footage showed Veronica leaving the house around 9:30 a.m. with a dark shape in the car's back seat. While Veronica insisted it was Andrea, expert analysis determined it was a reflection, not a person. Andrea denied the affair and the murder, calling Veronica's story a fabrication. She had a solid alibi, and there was no evidence of communication between them, discrediting Veronica's version. Veronica's actions pointed towards potential mental instability. Her bizarre behavior, including singing during interrogation and fluctuating between calm speech and incoherent mumbling, was noted by numerous officials. She seemed to drift in and out of reality, even miming smoking a cigarette. Her mother confirmed a history of mental health struggles, including suicide attempts after sexual abuse and an unsubstantiated rape accusation. Despite this, a psychiatric evaluation determined Veronica was sane, calculating, and cruel, with no significant impairment to justify an insanity plea. After 4 years of delays and investigations, she was convicted of premeditated murder and concealing a body, receiving a 30-year sentence. In court, she continued to accuse Andrea, leading to her removal. Today, Veronica remains imprisoned, the truth about Loris's death possibly lost forever. Many investigators suspect a planned murder, perhaps triggered by Loris refusing to attend school, a recurring issue. The pre-purchased zip ties hint at premeditation. Loris's father, devastated by the loss of his son, wife, and job, still questions Veronica's guilt, bewildered by the lack of a clear motive. He now focuses on raising his younger son, aided by his parents. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out these other videos too. Thank you and goodbye.